There are numerous bad actors in the comic book industry, creators, editors, personalities within comics that like to go out there and agitate the customers, go out there and poke them and kind of just drive them away. Two of those peoples had some news show up in the last week right around Christmas. We have Heather Antos and Mags Visaggio once again in the news, and we're talking about, I've certainly covered both here and there on the channel, certainly more Heather Antos and Mags Visaggio. We've got what I would consider to be some very bad news, especially if you're an IDW Star Trek fan. And then the other story, I think, just points out a lot of the deficiencies of the creator. And I have some comments or thoughts about this big story that came out on Twitter. It wasn't a big story like people are interested in. I mean, it's a big story. It's like a really big Twitter thread, really long. Like, you shouldn't use Twitter for your journal. It's supposed to be short, quick-hitting, sound bites or thoughts. But this thing is a fucking manifesto almost. I'll get to that. Obviously, I am Wes. This is Thinking Critical YouTube. I hope you enjoy the video. If at any time you like this, give me a thumbs up and let everyone know that you enjoyed the content. Now let's get into the Heather Antos story. Heather left Valiant Comics to be as the senior editor. Went over to IDW to be an editor. Seemed like a demotion at the time. And it's not a lateral move to go from senior editor to editor. So they took a little bit of a downgrade to work on Star Wars and Marvel action series at IDW, two of their licensed products they have from Disney, two of their better selling ones at that point. Not shocking. Disney pulled those licenses not soon thereafter. Was it because Heather was on the books? I can't confirm or deny that, but it certainly didn't help, considering Disney had already fired Heather Antos for being a not very good editor. The betting money was on Heather Antos's time at IDW being cut very short. But Heather is the gift that keeps on giving. Her time is not over at IDW Comics. She's actually been promoted to senior editor. So I guess she put in the hard work and is moving over to the Star Trek line. I have documented very well right here on the channel all the failings of Heather Antos as an editor in comic books. And that doesn't even get into the stuff where she's essentially an instigator, somebody that likes to go out there and attack fans and essentially destroy publishers' reputations. But you can see a direct correlation from the time Heather Antos, I think she was doing online gambling or something like that, went over to Valiant Comics, and essentially the quality and the sales tank on all their titles, and the publisher still hasn't recovered. Some of that might have to do with the COVID and pandemic stuff, but there's definitely a direct correlation between her arrival and tanking sales, and that was pre-COVID, so you can't blame it all on the pandemic. If you go back to Heather Antos's time at Marvel Comics, which was an odd choice to bring someone in that had only worked on one comic book. And from what we're here, the story is that they worked on that one comic book because Jordan White, one of the card-carrying members of the Legion of Doofuses, is he the president? Potentially he is. Actually told her, if you want me to hire you, you have to make a comic book. So they went and had their friends write a comic and acted like they edited it. There were numerous issues on the Star Wars line while she was the editor or assistant editor there at Star Wars. Other than the Darth Vader stuff, which her name is certainly on. I don't want to misconstrue the facts here. But other than that, that Star Wars line was crap. The Valiant line was absolute crap. And as soon as they moved over to IDW, Disney pulled their licenses. I guess rewarding poor job performance just comes with the industry within comic books. I don't know what it is about Heather Antos, how she has such a privileged existence no matter where she goes. It does not matter the quality of the work that they put in. It does not matter how much she disparages the consumer base, runs them off, treats them poorly. She's just always there. Now, I guess it's a privileged existence to be Heather Antos, but Heather Antos has been promoted. Now let's move over to Mags Visaggio, who was once the belle of the ball, was really been pushed as one of the up-and-coming superstars within comic books after a load of, in my opinion, initially probably worthy criticism, but soon turned into something very, very differently. And it was just kind of mean spirited and unwarranted. And people would end like, Mags Visaggio is the superstar writer in comic books. Turns out that wasn't true. And somehow Mags, despite being the type of writer, when I say being, like checks the boxes, transgender, marginalized community kind of thing, has somehow gotten themselves expelled from DC and Marvel. It's actually hard to do. I don't have time to go into all the transgressions of Mags Visaggio, but Mags recently went on to Twitter and laid out an airing of grievances. Apparently, Mags was celebrating Festivus this year about the editorial process from hell. Now, in this tweet thread, and it, like I said, it's like a manifesto or something of that nature. It's not a tweet. It's way bigger than that. Mags does not name the company or the specific editor that they were working with, but it's pretty clear that it's Joseph Illidge when he was working with Valiant Comics, and it's the series Dr. Mirage that they ended up publishing from Mags Visaggio. I'm not 100% certain on that one, but if I was a betting man, that's exactly who I'm pretty sure she's talking about. I think that's who most people think that Mags is talking about here. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's too damn long, but there are a couple of excerpts in here where I think Mr. Illidge might have been putting Mags on the right track. Well, let's go into this. This is the first quote. Quote, he sounds annoyed because they're on the phone. To even be on the phone with me, he hits me with criticism that doesn't just disagree with the proposal, but talks down to me too. The whole tenor of the conversation was that I was, in fact, stupid. That this wasn't just the wrong take, but that somehow I've turned around the most wildly incompetent document he'd ever read, talking about, I believe, maybe the outline for Dr. Mirage, or perhaps it's the first script. I would not be surprised if this was the most wildly incompetent document Joseph Illidge had read in his comic book career. And he's been working in comic books since like the 90s, at least. I know that Jervain Darkin, friend of the channel, comes on here and talks comics from time to time. When he worked at Milestone as an assistant editor, he worked with Joe. So it's been back in the day. And me personally, I don't know Joe Illidge, but Jervain does, and he has nothing but glowing words to say about Joseph, his professionalism, and the things that he learned from him about comic books. Obviously, Mags Visaggio disagrees. But having read enough of Mags' work, I would not be surprised if there were major issues with any of the drafts, first or final, that were turned in on any of the projects that they've done. Now, there have been a few pieces of work that have turned out better than others. I believe Kim and Kim is actually edited by friend of the channel, Joe Corallo. So that was definitely tighter than most. And obviously there was the one exception to the rule, which was, Ginny Hex from DC Comics that turned out to be good. But a lot of Mags' work does seem to have issues as far as storycraft. So I'm not surprised if he sounded a bit annoyed and did think it was the most wildly incompetent document he's ever read. But I also would be surprised if he was really talking like down, because people interpret things different ways. I've heard only that he was a professional individual. Now this next one, this is the playbook of what not to do if you want to be a comic book professional. Quote, at Gail Simone told me right around this time, if you let them, talking about editors, walk all over you now, they will never stop. So I respectfully defended my creative decisions. My goal was to show that I was thinking so we could find a mutually satisfying way there. You never go Gail Simone on your comic book career. Never, ever follow advice from people who are not in positions that you would aspire to. Gail Simone hasn't been a successful comic book writer in the industry for a decade now, right? They've gotten some chances here and there at DC and Marvel. They've squandered every single one of them as of late and are no longer a successful comic book writer. I would not go to Gail Simone for any advice when it came to comic book professionalism. Now, 15, 20 years ago, perhaps, but now is not the time to go to Gail Simone for any type of advice like this. Like I said, never go to somebody for advice unless they're in a position or in a place that you would aspire to be in. You know what I mean? If you're a comic pro, do not go to Gail Simone for advice on your career or you're going to end up like her and, you know, writing a one-shot at Ahoy Comics is your big break in 2022. That was bad advice. She also talks about going to Kelly Sue DeConnick, who is mocked and ridiculed by the fandom and writes really bad comic books nowadays. So I wouldn't go there either. Although Kelly Sue certainly appears to have had more success than Gail Simone's of late. So maybe that would be a better place to go. This is the final quote. This one tickled my ribs. I'm going to be honest with you. Quote him. Here's the thing. Me. What? Him. You'll be pitching in competition. This is after she's been hired. With 2 other writers. Me. But you already hired me on this. Him. Well, it's our new policy. Me. So let me pitch it first. And then if you don't like that, bring in someone else. Him. Well, see, we have this policy and that writers have to pitch it in competition. Me. But you already hired me. Well, I would say that at that point, Joseph Illidge was having some buyer's remorse. If this is in fact Joe Illidge and and the Dr. Murad series, I'm pretty sure it is. And I find this hilarious. That it would be offensive to actually have to be in competition for a job. I do think it would be stupid to do the competition after you actually hired the person. So that wasn't very smart. But certainly, if Mags Visaggio is one of your prospective creators on a project, you might want to bring in some competition and see who has better work. And see if you can do right by your customers and your editorial staff by bringing in the most competent, well-seasoned, and professional individuals. I do find that hilarious. I have to compete. You know, you're going to look at multiple versions of the work and decide which one that you want to put forward. Now, after this, apparently, that was not what was supposed to happen, and they bring the EIC in, and Joe by that time had moved on. He's at Heavy Metal, and Heavy Metal's actually doing some really good stuff under Joe. And we do end up getting the Dr. Murad series from Valiant, and it doesn't do very well. It's a Mags Visaggio book. The #1 issue did sell 11,000 copies, which is kind of good for Valiant until you think that it's the actual #1 issue. By the time they got to issue #5, the final of the miniseries, it was less than 4,000, which are terrible numbers no matter what publisher you're at. Now, I do need to remove the Antos Visaggio taste from my mouth, so I do have some good news I want to talk about. Livio Ramondelli, the illustrator of a lot of Transformer comics, if you're a fan of Transformers, and the illustrator writer behind the Killlock, is returning for a sequel series from IDW. The Killlock, the Artisan's Wraith. Hopefully, Heather Antos will not be touching this as an editor. The debut comic book was absolutely fantastic. I recommended it very highly. It was one of the best comic series of 2020. And this will, once again, will be illustrated and written by Ramondelli. And this new Artisan's Wraith storyline picks up where the first volume left off. The 4 criminals have managed to escape destruction, albeit not without complications. One of their number, the smartest and most malicious, now inhabits an unbreakable body and has a planet at his command. That would be the Artisan. The authorities cannot let this stand, deploying 2 of the deadliest assassins in the universe to eliminate this threat. And this is what Ramondelli had to say about the series. The essential premise of the Artisan's Wraith is, if you had both the might and mind to remake the faults that you see in society, would you remove it or create something worse? The scope of this series is larger than the first and will explore not only the future of the prior characters, but also introduce new ones as well to explore the dark origins of their universe. Sounds fantastic. It's got a great premise. In the hands of a lesser writer, I would be worried about some of the words there, but I do think Ramondelli has it within them to do a very good job. I hope to have Livio on the channel somewhat soon to talk about this project, but I am over the moon about this one, as well as the Aftershock sequel to We Live, which is also coming in 2022, and we should be getting the sequel to Barbaric. So it's all looking up, thinking critical in 2022. We're getting sequels to Barbaric, Killlock, and We Live. So there is good news in the universe. Obviously, I had to put you through the bad news first. Heather Antos has been promoted. It does look like Mags Visaggio burned some bridges down, but hey, that stuff happens. Now, I do want to say this. I did do an in-depth video about Heather Antos being promoted to senior editor at Valiant Comics at the time. I go through a lot of numbers. I point out a lot of the failings of Heather Antos at Valiant Comics and how her being promoted to senior editor was farcical. I find the promotion at IDW equally farcical. If you'd like to see that video is right here. I think you would like it. It definitely backs up a lot of the feelings that I have for Heather Antos with a lot more facts.